Welcome back to the book club. Today I am reviewing the book Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson. This is book two of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I just finished reading this book this morning, so I'm going to give my spoiler free review today. And within the next couple days, I'm going to record and post a video that's more in depth about more in depth book discussion that has a lot of spoilers and talks about specific things within the plot that I found interesting or whatever. But for this video, I'm going to keep it spoiler free and talk about out of 10 what I think the plot, the characters, and the pacing did, how well they did. And lastly, will I keep reading the series? Yes or no? So to kick it off, the plot, I spent some time thinking about this, and honestly, I can't think of any part of the plot that I am unhappy with, which I think is a good thing. So for now, at least, I'm going to be rating the plot a 10 out of 10. Maybe over time, as I think about it more, read more, that rating goes down a little bit. But at the moment, I think that all the issues I had with plot in the first book, Gardens of the Moon, were cleaned up here, and I was almost disappointed by another what I thought was going to be a Deus Ex Machina event again with a particular merchant, which I'll talk more about in my book discussion. But just so people who've read the book probably know what I'm talking about, this actually didn't end up impacting the climax of the book or the plot in a way that the Gardens of the Moon Deus Ex Machina that I talked about did, and rather just impacted potential future events. So I think that I was very satisfied. I was kind of sweating when that was happening and thinking that that was going to tamper my expectations or tamper the ending of the book. But I'm happy to say that I think that it wrapped up nicely. There's a lot of little treats left for things to happen in the next 8 books for all these various characters, and I think that the each arc that the characters went through, there was 4 different sets of characters throughout the book with a few more threads thrown in there. I think all those arcs ended in satisfying ways and also left some crumbs to be expanded on in the future, which is exactly what I would expect out of a book or out of a series where there's 8 more books to read. Nobody really gets a nice, nice solid conclusion, and there's always going to be more to come with most of these characters. And next, speaking of characters, I would rate the characters a 9 out of 10 in this book. I think almost all of the characters were very fun to read, and I was excited to read more about them, except for one, which is Felison, or however you say her name. And I don't want to spoil anything, but for like 75% of the book, I thought that she was very annoying to read. And it did make sense, but it was still annoying. And I feel like it could have been done maybe in a different way. Where it wasn't just like every time I read this person talking, she was being extremely annoying. Um, there's there's some trauma that happens to her which explains it, but I think that like it's difficult for me to still like fully say that she was a good character and like a well written character. Um, I'll talk about her more in my full book discussion that has a lot more spoilers because I can expand on the actual reasons why I didn't necessarily like what was going on with her. But I have to say every almost every other character was amazing. The other thing I'll note is that um, yet again Crocus did almost nothing in this book, and I think particularly in this book, in Gardens of the Moon, he actually did have a role, even though I thought that one of his like side plots was kind of boring. He if he didn't exist in this book, I think nothing would have changed. I may be forgetting like 1 or 2 things that happened, but for the most part, basically nothing would have changed if he didn't exist. So I don't know. Again, there's 8 more books in the series. Maybe he comes back or becomes relevant in some way. I guess I have to assume that that's the case. So perhaps like again, my opinion is going to change, and maybe on a future reread, I'm going to appreciate it more. But for now, he was basically a nothing character. And I was happy, I guess, that there wasn't really a viewpoint for him. We got the viewpoint of Fiddler, which was very interesting. Um, and Crocus was kind of just like there and being, kind of a nothing guy. But anyways, overall characters 9 out of 10. So for pacing, the last major category here, I also struggle to think of any issues that I had with pacing, and for now I'm going to rate this a 10 out of 10 as well. So when I think about rating the pacing of a book, what I think about is, were there any times that I, finished a chapter or put down the book because I was going to bed or too tired to keep reading, and I was kind of not wanting to pick up the book again, or like knew that when I started reading again, I would have to work through some boring bit to get to the good bit. I think that this isn't necessarily a bad thing to happen. I think a lot of books have, you know, their more expository periods, and then there are more climactic periods, maybe is a way to put it. But there's like, you have to build up to the big events, and it can't just all be big events. I think that the reason that this book did so well in regard to pacing is because, again, I mentioned earlier, but there were four different major plot threads or arcs that were happening with various characters. There was like the Felsen and Heboric stuff. There was Duiker and the Chain of Dogs. There was Kalam and Fiddler and company, and then there's Mappo and Icarium, and those last two kind of blend together a little bit. Um, but still, I would say there was four different threads there, and because there was four different arcs, they were each like able to be interesting at different times. So there were times where things happening with, let's say, like Duiker and the Chain of Dogs was, very compelling, very interesting. There's some sort of climax happening there, and then it cuts over to maybe a more, build uppy part of Kalam's story, and then Kalam has something interesting happening to him, and then you get the buildup of Felison and Hiboric, and there was kind of this constant trade off between big things happening and little things happening with all these different threads, where it kept the book interesting throughout all 820 something pages, which I think is really impressive. There was really no time where I was like, okay, I have to just grind through 50 pages of build up to a climax, which I know is going to probably pay off, but still sometimes like, it's disappointing to have to, go through those chunky sections of characters walking across a landscape for many days. I'm kind of thinking of Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy when I'm thinking about like where pacing could have been done better in some parts. There's not really any like Bob walks across a valley for 30 pages and just like experiences hardship. That does happen to a character, but meanwhile, you also get interesting things happening with the other characters. So overall, I think the pacing of this book was excellent. I think that by this point in the series, if you're on book two, you don't quite have the issues that Gardens of the Moon had. So I took away some points in Gardens of the Moon for pacing because it was just like, it's hard to get into this like new world where there's so many different races and millennia of gods and elder races and warrens and magic and all this stuff. Like you have an understanding of that in this book, so it's not really things getting thrown at you anymore. There's still a lot of new characters and that kind of thing, but you're able to understand the world much more quickly. So like right away, the plot becomes super relevant and it's not just all world building. So I think that helps the pacing and keeps the pacing high in this book. And so to wrap it up, will I keep reading the series? Yes or no? The answer is a definitive yes here. I think that it should be probably pretty clear that I enjoyed this book a lot. Rating, the plot a 10, characters 9, pacing a 10. That's a pretty good book. I don't have really many many negative notes across all these various categories. There was like one character I didn't like very much and one that I thought was useless, but there was like 50 characters in this book. There's like 100 different plot events and it's 800 pages. So like keeping the pacing steady throughout is, quite an incredible feat. I don't know if this series is going to continue to meet these expectations or if some of the books are going to be a little bit harder to get through than others. I don't remember which books in particular. Maybe if I like look at the cover, I can figure it out. But I feel like I remember reading comments on Reddit that people thought maybe it was Reaper's Gale was like a weak book, and Toll the Hounds was strong yet again. I saw a lot of love for Deadhouse Gates, so I think that clearly this book was, viewed as one of the better ones in this series, or at least like maybe the more engaging ones. The books do keep getting longer as well, so I'll be curious to see if the pacing keeps up, and Erickson's able to like keep each book well paced or as well paced as this. Um, but I do plan on continuing the series. I'm not going to read book 3, which is Memories of Ice. I'm not going to be reading that right away. I'm going to read a couple other books in between, give myself a little break, and then dive back into Malazan or the Malazan series. Um, for as good as these books are, they're also pretty massive books. Reading 800 something pages. Um, it takes a lot of time, and I like to read a lot of different books. So I don't want to just dedicate the next like 4 months to only reading the Malazan books. So I'm going to be reading a couple other books in between. I'll be posting reviews about those, and then I'm going to get back to I already forget the name of book number 3, Memories of Ice. I'll be getting back to that probably in a few weeks. I expect that I'll probably finish that early November, based on the couple other books that I plan on reading. So if you guys have read Deadhouse Gates and you agree or disagree with anything that I've said here, let me know in the comments below. If you have other, tidbits about which books in the series are slumps and which ones are, super hot fire like this book was, also let me know. I'm curious what people's opinions are on like if the book continues this pace or if the series continues this pace throughout, or if some of the books are going to be a bit harder to get through. I read the back of Memories of Ice. Just one additional note. Keep having one more thing here, but I read the back of Memories of Ice because I was curious if this was going to be, a third set of characters. There was some overlap here, but a lot of new characters. I was curious if the series was going to go where like we just go to a totally new continent again and just meet a bunch of new people and there's maybe some minor overlap. But it actually seems like Memories of Ice goes back to the Holy War issue happening in Darudistan that sort of was what was ending in uh, Gardens of the Moon, which has me very pumped actually to read it. So I'm hoping that it's as good as Deadhouse Gates was, because it looked like there's going to be more Animander Rake and Kaladin Brood and Dujak One Arm. There's also some very interesting details about Dujek that happened at the very end of this book, which again I'll hopefully end up talking about in my full-on book discussion. But all those things have me excited to keep reading the series. Probably mid-October, I'm going to start reading book number 3. Um, so I'm pretty excited for that. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do all the YouTube things. If there's other books that are maybe good books for Malazan fans, let me know in the comments below as well. I'm always looking to add more books to my library, to my to be read list, which is already too long. And I'll see you next time.